Level 1. Negative balance. Your account is overdrawn by $4. A coffee you forgot was scheduled to charge. The fee arrives within the hour. $35. The penalty for being broke is that you become more broke. But the real penalty is not on your statement. It is in your brain. Researcher Mullainathan at Harvard documented what happens neurologically at this exact moment. The brain enters scarcity mode. The threat detection system, centered on the amygdala, activates and begins redirecting cognitive resources toward the immediate crisis. Your working memory, the mental workspace you need for planning, problem-solving, and impulse control, becomes partially occupied by the math of not having enough. How do I cover rent? What else will bounce? Can I eat today? This is the bandwidth tax. And at a negative balance, it is running at maximum. Mullainathan's research showed that this cognitive load reduces effective IQ by roughly 13 points, the equivalent of a full night without sleep. You are not thinking less clearly because you are a less capable person. You are thinking less clearly because your brain has allocated its best resources to a crisis, and everything else, including the decisions that might fix the crisis, gets what is left over. Your cortisol is elevated. Neuroscientist Farah at the University of Pennsylvania has documented that sustained financial stress produces chronically elevated cortisol, which impairs the prefrontal cortex and strengthens the amygdala. The region responsible for planning gets weaker. The region responsible for fear gets stronger. At a negative balance, your brain is being physically reshaped towards short-term survival thinking by the stress of the situation itself. You skip lunch on Wednesday, not by choice. Hunger at this level is not just physical. Researcher Matthew Gelliot at Florida State University showed that glucose depletion directly impairs self-regulation and decision-making. The brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's glucose. When you cannot eat, the prefrontal cortex, already weakened by cortisol, loses even more capacity. The decisions you make hungry are measurably worse than the decisions you make fed, and the system that made you hungry does not account for this. You walk into the bank. The teller's face changes. Psychologist Michael Krauss at Yale has documented that humans detect social hierarchy within milliseconds. The shift in her expression is not imagined. It is a real micro-expression that your brain's social monitoring system, the same system that evolved to track your status in the group, registers instantly. Your brain classifies the interaction as a status threat. Cortisol spikes again. You leave feeling smaller than when you walked in, not because anyone said anything cruel, but because your threat detection system just processed a signal that says you are at the bottom, and the bottom is where danger lives. Level 2. $200. You pulled the account back. 20 hours of overtime. The bandwidth tax has eased slightly, but it has not released. Researcher Shafir at Princeton found that people operating just above scarcity still allocate significant cognitive resources to monitoring their financial position. The crisis passed, but the brain has not fully disengaged from threat mode. It is watching, scanning, waiting for the next shock. The maintenance fee hits. $12 withdrawn silently. The bank requires $1,500 to waive it. You do not have $1,500. You are paying a fee for the condition of not having enough, and the fee makes the condition worse. This is the scarcity trap that Mullainathan described, where each cost of being poor makes the next round of poverty more expensive, which taxes more bandwidth, which produces worse decisions, which deepens the trap. Your brain at $200 is not at rest. It is in surveillance mode. The amygdala is not firing at crisis levels, but it is primed. Psychologist Roy Baumeister at the University of Queensland has documented that this state of chronic low-level vigilance depletes self-control resources over time. Every financial decision, no matter how small, costs more cognitive effort than the same decision would cost someone with margin. The exhaustion you feel at the end of the day is not laziness. It is a brain that has been running threat calculations since morning. Level 3. $2,000. Something shifts. Not in your account, in your neurochemistry. Researcher Elizabeth Dunn at the University of British Columbia found that financial stability, even modest stability, produces a measurable reduction in cortisol and a corresponding increase in prefrontal cortex function. The bandwidth tax begins to lift. The mental workspace that was occupied by survival calculations starts to open. You can think about next month, not just tomorrow. The bank notices the pattern. Your direct deposit hits consistently. The maintenance fee disappears. The same fee that drained you for years just stopped. Nothing changed about you as a person. Your behavior matched a profile that generates revenue for the institution, so the system adjusted. Your brain processes this as a signal of safety, and something loosens. Not joy, relief. A neurochemical state closer to baseline than anything you have felt in months. The credit card offers arrive. Real ones. Your brain responds to the approval notification with a dopamine release, the same reward signal that fires for any positive social feedback. Psychologist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA has shown that financial inclusion activates the same neural circuitry as social inclusion. Being approved feels, neurologically, like being accepted into a group. The bank did not change its opinion of you. It changed its classification of you. But your brain cannot tell the difference. Level 4. $15,000. The prefrontal cortex is fully online now. The bandwidth tax is functionally gone. Researcher Kathleen Vose at the University of Minnesota found that when people feel financially secure, their cognitive performance on complex tasks improves measurably, not because they became smarter, but because the resources that were consumed by scarcity monitoring are now available for everything else. The bank assigns you a relationship banker. He calls you by name. He asks about your goals. This is not kindness. It is behavioral economics applied at the institutional level. But your brain does not process it as strategy. It processes it as recognition. The social monitoring system that classified you as a risk at negative balance now classifies you as valued. The cortisol drops further. The prefrontal cortex strengthens further. You are making better decisions now, not because you are trying harder, but because the neurochemical environment in which you make decisions has fundamentally changed. A fee appears on your statement. You email. It is reversed in 3 hours. The same fee that was immovable at $200 is now optional at $15,000. The system did not change. Your position in it did. And your brain, tracking your social position with the precision of a million-year-old algorithm, adjusts everything. Your confidence, your risk tolerance, your willingness to advocate for yourself accordingly. Level 5. $80,000. The word preferred appears on your screen. Psychologist Piff at UC Irvine documented what begins to happen at this level. As financial security increases, the brain begins to shift from interdependent processing to independent processing. You start to see your outcomes as products of your own effort rather than products of the system. The structural advantages that carried you here become invisible, not because you are dishonest, but because the brain habituates to favorable conditions the same way it habituates to any consistent stimulus. Your empathy circuitry, documented by Keltner at Berkeley, begins to show the shift. At lower levels, your brain invested heavily in reading other people because you needed them. At $80,000, the dependency decreases and the neural investment follows. You do not become cruel. You become slightly less attuned. The teller who ignored you at $200 is now someone you barely notice. Not because you are unkind, because your brain, freed from the pressure of needing her approval, has reallocated its attention to other things. Level 6. $500,000. The default mode network, the brain system that processes self-referential thinking, operates differently now. Researcher Raichle at Washington University showed that this network is most active during periods of rest and reflection. At lower wealth levels, the default mode network, when active, tends to generate rumination, worry, threat scanning. At this level, the same network generates planning, aspiration, identity consolidation. The content of your inner monologue has shifted because the neurochemical environment in which it runs has changed. The bank sends someone to your office. He brings reports in a leather folder. He does not try to sell you anything. He consults you. Your brain processes this interaction through the lens of social hierarchy, and the signal is unambiguous. You are high status. Psychologist Cameron Anderson at UC Berkeley has documented that perceived high status produces elevated testosterone, reduced cortisol, and increased activation in the brain's reward circuitry. You feel more confident. You make decisions faster. You tolerate risk more easily. Not because the money made you braver, because the neurochemistry of status made you chemically different from the person you were at $200. Level 7. 5 million. You have a private banker. He knows your children's names. He remembers the foundation you mentioned over coffee. This level of personalized attention is strategic, but your brain processes it as genuine social bonding. Researcher Robin Dunbar at Oxford University documented that the brain maintains close social bonds through a system limited to roughly 150 meaningful relationships. Your private banker has inserted himself into that circle. The oxytocin system, the brain's bonding circuitry, does not distinguish between strategic friendship and real friendship. It responds to the signals, the eye contact, the remembered details, the personalized attention, regardless of the motivation behind them. The interest rate on your mortgage is negotiated, not published. The investment minimum is waived. The rules that applied to every level below this one are now flexible. Your brain, processing this experience through its fairness and status circuitry, does not register this as unfair. It registers it as normal. Psychologist Shai Davidai at the New School documented this asymmetry. Headwinds, the obstacles you faced, are highly salient. Tailwinds, the advantages you benefit from, are invisible. The preferential treatment feels earned because the brain does not track the structural advantages that made it possible. Level 8. 25 million. You do not have a banker, you have a relationship. And the neurological difference between being served and being partnered is measurable. At this level, the institution consults you. The chief investment officer asks your opinion. The head of private banking visits your office. Your brain processes this as the highest possible status signal, a signal that you are not just in the group, but shaping it. Researcher Michael Marmot at University College London spent decades studying the relationship between social hierarchy and health outcomes. His research, conducted across entire populations, showed that the higher a person's position in a hierarchy, the lower their cortisol, the stronger their immune function, and the longer their lifespan. The relationship is not about money, it is about the brain's perception of control and status. At 25 million, your brain perceives maximum control, and it rewards you for it with the neurochemistry of health. Somewhere right now, someone has a minus sign in front of their balance. They overdrafted by $4. The fee hit within the hour. Their brain is running the bandwidth tax at full capacity. Their cortisol is elevated. Their prefrontal cortex is impaired. Their decisions are compromised by a cognitive load they did not choose and cannot turn off. They are the same person you are. The same brain, the same architecture, the same capacity. The only difference is the number next to their name. And that number is not just changing how the bank treats them. It is changing how their brain works, what they can think about, how far into the future they can see, and who they believe they are. The brain does not change at every level. The chemistry does. And the person who emerges at each tier is not a different human. They are the same human, running the same hardware in a different neurochemical environment. And the environment was never neutral. It was always the variable, from the very first dollar.